Hello, and welcome to Money Matters TV and our segment called Growth Stories, where we hear from entrepreneurs and advisors sharing secrets and advice on what business owners need to know to grow. I'm your host, Mike Verrill, Managing Director with Sharp Capital Advisors, a member of the Sharp Financial family. The problem for business owners is fractured business and personal financial advice. Our solution is a unique integrated financial management approach. We've unified business advisory, accounting and tax, investment banking, wealth management, and family office services in a way that creates maximum value and helps business owners and their families achieve extraordinary things. From time to time, financial issues involving life sciences, healthcare, technology companies may be discussed on the show. Those discussions are not and should not be viewed as financial advice. Moreover, since the show is pre-recorded and shown at a later date, some of those discussions may no longer be timely. Please seek advice from your financial advisor before entering into any financial transaction. I'm joined by my co-host, Katie Wenger. Katie is a transaction and advisory associate with CBRE, a global real estate consulting firm. Katie helps high-growth companies in the Philadelphia market with their real estate strategies that support their business objectives. Katie is also an advising member for the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technology and is an active member of the Women's Network in Philadelphia. As always, Katie, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's great to see you again, and thrilled for today's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into it, I'd love to hear an update from you. You hear lots about the hybrid working environment, and I'm just curious from your perspective, how is that changing or impacting big company real estate decisions or smaller companies in dealing with the hybrid work situation that's
Yeah,
on the current?
it's a great question. We have seen truly an evolution across the past few years. Essentially when COVID first happened, a lot of companies were forced to go remote, and that had really started this pattern of a hybrid environment. I think throughout the last 3 years, we've seen companies test the waters with remote only working, with office only working, and we're really kind of falling somewhere in the middle where companies are choosing a number of days, whether it's during the week or during the months in which employees are expected to be back in the office. So a lot of different clients of ours who maybe were cutting down a ton of space are kind of reevaluating some of their space and thinking about it in a different way. I think absolutely hybrid's here to stay, but it's starting to look a little bit different than maybe we had predicted in the beginning of all this, when everybody felt that remote work was the only possible kind of future. So it's going to continue to change and evolve, and we're working through it with a number of clients, and everybody has a different perspective and a different solution. So it's been challenging and exciting all at once to find what that solution looks like for these groups.
Great. So I guess the proposed Armageddon for commercial real estate office space is not going to come true, and there'll be some kind of alternative solution that we should deal with.
I hope so. I mean, we'll see, but it continues to evolve, and it's really market based. It's product based. It depends on the ecosystem of the companies in a particular market. So, it's interesting to see. We mainly see the flight to quality is what we like to say, and tenants want nice office space. That's what we're primarily seeing.
Keeps their employees wanting to come back.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited for our guest today. He's a third generation craftsman, having grown up in the pool construction and outdoor landscaping space. But before we hear from him, we do have a question from one of our viewers. Jack Mason from Philadelphia would like to know, are commercial real estate rentals going up or down in large cities in the U.S. at this time? And when I think about this question, Katie, I guess you can answer it from two directions. One could be rental rates, and the other can be occupancy rates. And so maybe talk about that in general in both of those aspects, and then give us this insight into what's going on in the Philadelphia market.
Yeah, would be happy to. It's a great question. And thanks so much, Jack, for sharing. I think, it's interesting. Similar to what I just said regarding the flight to quality, that's true for Philadelphia. That's true for a lot of markets. Tenants who really want to get their employees back into the office are seeking really high quality space. So we call it a trophy building. And in those trophy buildings, rents continue to soar. However, when we look at maybe some buildings that aren't in the best market, or they're really becoming a little bit functionally obsolete, those rental rates might be trending downward. So it depends on the type of product we're talking about and also the location. There's some cities that have done extraordinarily well. Philadelphia always really falls in the middle. I would say, cities like San Francisco that formerly had, Silicon Valley and the big boom of office maybe isn't as occupied as it once was. We're continuing to see what really this all pans out to be, but those nice high quality trophy, as we call them, buildings continue to fare really, really well.
Great. Thanks for that insight, Katie. Jack, hopefully that was helpful and answered your question. To send in for a future episode to Money Matters TV, here's instructions on how to do so.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Having grown up in the business and learning the trade from his grandfather, our guest today has built a reputation of delivering excellence with a huge dose of customer service. Katie and I are pleased to welcome the growth stories, Scott Payne, president of Scott Payne Outdoor Group. Scott, it's great to have you on our show today, and looking forward to hearing from you and sharing more of your story. Thanks for joining us.
Katie, it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Scott. So we'd love to just start off. Can you give us a brief overview of Scott Payne Outdoor Group and your affiliated companies that fall under your umbrella?
Oh, I'd love to do that. Scott Payne Outdoor Group is a complete outdoor construction design and build company. It's comprised of 4 companies in that sector and then one off to the side. So the company that everybody knows us best for is Scott Payne Custom Pools. That company, we're getting ready to celebrate our 10-year anniversary in 2024, which is pretty exciting. We call it the sister company is Scott Payne Outdoors. Scott Payne Outdoors makes up the pieces of the puzzle that are still needed for an outdoor project, but don't necessarily fall under the pool scope, such as structures, hardscape, landscape. We do sport courts, putting greens, outdoor kitchens. So there's a lot of projects that we're not doing a pool, but we are doing a substantial amount of work. In addition, which spawned out of the pool company, is Pool Refresh, which is our pool renovation division, which is growing very rapidly. And that sister company is Pool Perfect. That's our service division. So we service pools, openings, closings, weekly service. And they kind of all go in hand and tend to feed each other. Our 5th company is not necessarily in the pool sector, is a company called Atlas Concrete Coatings. So we do industrial floor coatings as well as residential garages.
Awesome. Well, that's great. You got quite a bit going on there, Scott. That I'm sure keeps you busy all day long.
It does.
So one of the things we love to get into on the show is the background of our guests, learning about, where you grew up, how you grew up, kind of family life. Always looking to see what were some of your experiences that maybe led you down that entrepreneurial path? Some people just kind of fall into that entrepreneurial spirit, and others kind of have had early childhood experiences that kind of directed them in that path. So just curious to get your background. And I know we mentioned your grandfather, learning the trade from him. So I'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, Mike, it's a great question. If Steve Jobs has a great line, and that's in life, you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. So if I had to connect them looking back, I would say, I've always been gravitated towards people jobs, where I could speak to people, interact with people, and that was all out of high school and a little bit of college, and then into my professional career. You mentioned my pop-up, and I'm 57 years old, and he passed away when I was 9. passed away April 15th of 1975. It's not hard for me to honestly still get dusty, even talking about him. The man was a legend. He was a legend in the commercial swimming pool sector. There's patents that are still propped up on his prior art that some of it's 60, 65 years old now. Unfortunately, he died very suddenly, unexpectedly. And I always look back and wonder, if he'd have stayed alive for just, maybe another 5 years or 10 years, how different my life would have been. My mom and dad took the company over after he passed away. Transparently, they were not pool people by nature, although my dad did work for the company as a mechanic. My mom at that time was a stay-at-home mom with myself and my sister. So the company stayed around for about 4 or 5 years after that, early 80s. We all can look back in the history books and know how tumultuous that time was. Quite frankly, similar to almost what we're against today, with rising fuel costs and inflation and crazy things. And the business went away. I never really had a chance at the family business. It bothered me. I'm not going to lie to you. I come from a very strong Italian family, and my little Aunt Rose and everybody would grab my cheek and say, "Scotty boy, I'm surprised you never got in the pool business." As I got older, and I had some brief opportunities through the years to either work on one of my grandfather's pools as a subcontractor with a company, but once again, going back, I love people and I love the interaction and making people smile. So I found myself as a bartender and I sold copiers and, one of my first sales jobs was selling rainbow vacuum cleaners, which I think has given me some tenacity still for what I do today. And once again, looking backwards, it prepared me for what was to come.
I would say sales is a common characteristic of entrepreneurs that we come across. There's nothing more important than going out and finding those next customers, right? And so sales is a huge skill set to being an entrepreneur.
Like it's funny you say it like that. I would recommend it to anybody. If somebody's not comfortable getting on a camera like this, with maybe tens of thousands of people ultimately watching this video, take a public speaking course, join in Toastmasters. It's I hate to say it, but I talk in a mirror to myself. I learned to get comfortable inside of my own skin, articulate and get my points across. And I did this years ago. And it's paid off in dividends where, there's a lot of people that have a great product that they just can't push it out because of stage fright, fear of rejection. I've always spun it around in my life and said, I want to hear no's because I know what the percentage is to get the yes.
Right. Absolutely. Great statistic to track.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that mentality. And Scott, you were starting to go into kind of, obviously with the inspiration of your family and family business, how did you transition from knowing this is maybe a goal of yours and getting to the point where you're operating a business with 5 different business lines? At what point did you kind of make that transition to starting your own business, and how did you get there?
Katie, it's not a short story, so I'll make it as brief as I can. And this is a inspiration. Anybody watching this that doesn't know, right? I had no idea what I was going to do. I'll be honest. I bartended and I did a bunch of crazy things and sales, and I was in the car business for a good portion of my early professional career and sales and in a bunch of different capacities. I realized at one point around 25, 26 years old that I had to grow up. I had to do something. Admittedly, I don't have a college degree, although I attended college. It's still on one of my goals, maybe to go back and complete that at some point. But I latched onto a company as a truck driver in the mid 90s, early 90s, actually, 93, 92. And I was forced to mature. I literally left Valley Forge, PA every morning, and I ended up in one of the 5 boroughs in New York about 2.5 hours later. I did this for 6 years. And I could tell you it was not what I wanted to do with my life, but it taught me a lot of discipline. It used my sales skills because I was constantly getting out of situations, getting yelled at from parking tickets to, it was a paper and packaging company, and they weren't really the best company out there. I later had an opportunity to come on. They let me reluctantly let me sell, and they actually paid my driving rate for 1 day a week and would allow me to go out and knock on doors. So what I did was I used it as an opportunity and a springboard, and I would take a Sharpie and I would write 25 on my palm every morning. It was every Wednesday that I could go sell, shave, put on a shirt and tie, and I would not come back until I spoke to 25 people. And within a year, within a couple months, I asked to be 100% commission. Within maybe a month after that, I added a second day. I gave up a driving day. And then I transitioned to 3 and 2, 2 and 3. I don't remember it ever going to 4 and 1. And within a year, I had replaced about a $75,000 a year job, 100% commission. And at that point, I never looked back. I killed it. I was on a mission, and I started a family, young child, pregnant wife. At that time, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and she was living with me. So I had some responsibility. The bad news of this conversation was my GM and I had this continuous head smashing contest. And I used to politely refer to him as sales prevention. he would do everything in the world to make sure we couldn't sell anything.
Right.
It was a pre-approved pricing, or it was bizarre thinking back about it. So he exercised his right in 2004, and he fired me. So here I am with all the above baggage that I just described. In addition, I was bright enough to sign a no compete for $100, and that locked it in the PA law that I received compensation. I had no severance package. I had unemployment, and I had an axe to grind. So my industry at that time was pretty small, and word got out that I was no longer at the paper company, and I would be available. And they came calling. I had interviewed with a lot of companies. Nobody wanted to take a chance on the contract. The company knew how pissed I was, and they knew that once I got out of the no compete, if I got back in the industry, not only was I going after my old customers, but I was going to go after their customers. And I knew them all because I drove for the company for 13 years. So as crazy as this story sounds, I got called to an interview in Warminster, PA, by one of the larger companies. And the guy said, listen, we believe we have a workaround with your contract. We're familiar with it, and we'd like you to come down and talk to us. So I went down, and all I heard was Charlie Brown's teacher. I heard this pitch, and we want you here. And I had a suit on, and at that time I was living pretty well. I'd bought my wife a brand new H2 Hummer for her 30th birthday. I drove up in a Hummer, and they slid an offer sheet across the table, and I looked at it, and the bottom number was not small. And they all threw their hands up and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I need to think about it." And it was like the air got let out of the room. And if nobody's figured out, I'm a type A driver personality. I don't answer to anybody in my life, except for my wife now. And I got into her H2 and I started driving home. And, once again, we're going back 2004. So my DP 550 cell phone rang, and it was a good friend of mine. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Charlie, I just left an interview." And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think I'm going to go home, and I'm going to try and find a beam in my house that I can wrap the rope around my neck and swing from, and it's going to snap my neck." And he said, "Stop. Is it that bad?" And I said, "It is." I don't like this industry. I don't. I'm just really, really good at it. And I like my customers. Other than that, I really don't want to get back in the paper industry. So the magic phrase comes out. I'm taking a story full circle. I'm surprised you never got into pool business because you're pop-up. And I'm like, just give me $5. Just, make me feel better. And he said, I just signed a contract to build a new pool with Blue Haven. And they're always looking for good people. And I always use this part of the story and say, if anybody's seen the Blues Brothers with Jake doing the backflips through the church and sunlight, this is that story. I'm in my wife's car with a suit on and my resume on the front seat, driving northbound on Route 309. And as I'm having this conversation, I'm literally 2 miles, then a mile, then a half mile from the front door of Blue Haven Pools. True story. So I pull in the driveway and I walk up to the sales office and I ask this woman, her name was Debbie Moya, is Ray Calvetti here? And she said, no, I'm sorry, he's next door. So I buttoned my jacket, grabbed my resume. I walked across where the construction office was at the time. And it was an old farmhouse. And I literally walked through the front door, the kitchen door, whatever it was. And I says, Ray here. And hold on, let me get him. So this little Italian guy comes bebopping down the stairs from upstairs where his office was. And he looks at me and he says, can I help you? And I said, yep, I think I'm here for a job. Stuck my hand out. And we shook hands and he looked me in the eye and he says, do you have any experience? And I said, no. and he laughed and I laughed. And he said, I love honesty. And I said, me too. I said, my challenge has been working for an honest company. So I said, how long have you been doing this? And at the time, I'm going to say he was in his 60s. And he said, 35 years. And I said, quite possibly you remember my pop-up. And he said, who was that? And I said, Tony Bosco. He said, Jesus, kid. He said, your pop-up is a legend. Sit down. The rest is history. I literally started the next day. And I had this force behind me like I've never felt in my life to go prove something, to do something that, although I knew water was wet and I knew pools had skimmers, my knowledge at the time, that I was going to learn and I was going to be the best at it. And it took time, took some bumps, but I became top selling salesman ever to go through that office. There's records that'll never, ever be broken. I became a regional sales manager for him in a very short period of time. I managed 3 offices. I managed about as many as 11, 12 salesmen at one time, helped take the company to another level, put some integrity back into the selling process. And this all sounds like an awesome story where, flowers probably float down right now. But the bad news was 2008, the Lehman Brothers crash. So I went from building myself back up to one of the second biggest tumble I've ever had in my career as far as, money loss and, just business just went away.
Right. Yeah. I mean, not a lot of people building custom pools at that point.
Yeah. It was a challenge, shortly after Blue Haven. I actually went and got a full-time job. 2009, I was ready to lose everything I owned. And I went and got a job at a car dealership managing 70 people. In the meantime, I also sold pools at night. I had left Blue Haven. I had a short consulting gig for a company called Seasonal World that was based in New Jersey. I taught them how to build gunite pools. I was there 1 year. That was what our contract was. And the 366th day, I walked out the door thinking I was out of the pool business. Shortly after, I got a phone call from a company called Arista Pools in Montgomery County, PA. Their salesman had throat cancer. He was part of the family. It was 2 families, the Cicios and the Faravantes that owned the company. And I was the first outside salesman ever hired for that company. I was very enticed because at one point they wanted to sell 50% of the company. One of the partners was retiring. So I went there with the intention of buying the company, buying 50%, the shares
Mhm.
out. In 2014, after being there 3 years, they, if I could be honest, they decided to deduct a bunch of money from my sales sheet, unannounced. And that day, we had a meeting about it, and we couldn't come to a resolution of the money that was truly owed to me. I left that office. I went home. I formed an LLC. I got an EIN. I called an insurance company. I went on GoDaddy. I bought Scott Payne Custom Pools. My girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, I sent an email to. It's under my desk pad at the office, and the subject line said freedom. And I said, hit send on the email, and she responded, 10 minutes later, honey, there's nothing in the email. And I said, no, it's the first email ever sent by Scott Payne Custom Pools.
Wow.
It was
That's cool.
August 4th of 2014. And, we started with zero. I bootstrapped this company from $300 to we're an 8-figure revenue company as of this year, mid 8 figures, 15 million, all the divisions. So it's been a crazy ride to get here. And I support the entrepreneur. If you think you need something, well, I'll tell you what, sitting here, you don't. You think you need money? You don't. You think you need somebody to encourage you? You don't. You got to do it yourself. The lesson I learned here is, honestly, in 2014, I literally burned my ship. I was 2 years out of my house. I was dead broke. And it sucked. But I'll tell you, there was a lesson, and the lesson rings true. We're 25 employees, still looking to grow the company, acquire companies if possible. And it's just, I love the entrepreneur spirit, not because I'm in it, but I love success stories.
That's the true, ups and downs of the entrepreneur. But, basically at the end of the day, willing to take a risk and bet on yourself. I mean, that's really, I think, when it comes down to, that's an incredible story, Scott. I really appreciate you sharing that.
No, thank you.
Any one or two tips? I mean, you've given us a lot of things, but Dave, just give us one quick tip or two on what you would tell an entrepreneur starting their own business.
Be honest to yourself. Realize, everybody relies on Google and AdWords and think they need to market. But I learned something through a lot of organizations, and that is your network is your net worth. Mm-hmm. And you got to get out there and you got to tell your story to people. And the path takes you there. You got to believe.
Right.
You got to picture you're already there. I'll be honest with you. I pictured sitting in this office, driving the car I am, married to the woman I am, with the business I have. You got to believe. You got to believe you're already there to get there.
That's tremendous advice. Scott, thank you so much. Katie, as always, appreciate you helping me out with the show. And thanks for joining us for Growth Stories. The next guest on Money Matters TV is Doug Hepburn Financial Advisors. As a reminder, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Stitcher, as well as see programs on your YouTube channel, money-matterstv.com. Thank you for joining us for Growth Stories.